Welcome to the IDP show. I'm your host, Evan Ronda, and I'm joined by my best friend, the late round DB, Jake Colhagen. Jake, number one, congrats on the new handle on the Bird app, X, whatever you want to call it now. Big reference to JJ Zacharyson there. I feel like it's pretty fair to say you're very much like the JJ Zacharyson of IDP. Just massive brain, arguably the biggest brain. Lots of spreadsheets, lots of information. Man, Jake, we haven't done a pod together in a while. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Evan. Even better now. I'm going to attempt to get my inflated ego through the doorway here after this pod is done, but we will see. I love me some JJ. I love to be analytical. I love to try and make some sense of all this. So hopefully we do that here tonight. And I'm excited to spend some time with you. How are you, sir?
Man, I'm doing great. The football season came way too fast. So all of you guys in all your fantasy leagues, I know you are stoked for football season to start. Just remember, us content creators out there, like, man, as soon as kickoff happens, we are grinding to get you guys that content. So we love to do it. It's a good time. And on that note, we're going to jump right into today's episode. We are doing the week 1 preview. Now, this will be an episode we do every single freaking week. Last season, we did a couple alternations. This time, you are stuck with me and Jake every single week. So I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. You're going to love it. Now, I want to make sure that our listeners here understand what the heck we're even doing on this episode. So to give you guys a general idea, I'm not going to tell you to start TJ Watt. You know you should start TJ Watt. I mean, come on, man. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about borderline start-worthy players or borderline bench-worthy players and make sure that you guys have the level of confidence you need to make that tiebreaker decision to set your lineup to get those last couple extra points each week. So we're going to go game by game, introduce the matchup, and pick a couple guys from each team that we have some hot takes on. And honestly, let's be real. They're not going to be hot takes because it's us. We know what we're talking about. So without any further ado, Jake, let's go ahead and start it off with the Thursday night football game. Detroit Lions at the Kansas City Chiefs. Are they at the Kansas City Chiefs or are they in Detroit? I don't remember.
At Kansas City.
At Kansas City. Great. Not that that makes any difference, but we're talking about that Thursday night game that has the highest over-under of the entire week. Keep that in mind, listeners. Games with a higher over-under tend to play more snaps. More snaps equal more points. Shout out, Jake, for cluing me in on that. That's some pretty cool information. So if you guys need a tiebreaker, hey, check the line. Whenever we talk about these matchups, we also want to make a note to talk about the offensive line grade, because the better the offensive line, the more challenging it will be for the opposing defensive line to be productive for fantasy that week. So both of these teams have pretty solid offensive lines. Detroit has the 5th best offensive line, according to PFF, and the Chiefs' offensive line is the 3rd best, according to PFF. So both teams' defensive linemen might struggle to produce elite numbers this week, but that by no means means that you should not be starting good players. Just keep that in mind if you need a bit of a tiebreaker. But let's go ahead and start off on the Detroit defense and talk about some dudes that we are starting this weekend. I will go ahead and start us off with possibly the most disgusting name that we can begin with Alex Anzalone. I know we were hoping that Jack Campbell would come and usurp him for that starting linebacker job with 100% of snaps in the green dot, but it appears that Anzalone still has his hand on that role for now. We'll see how it looks throughout the course of the season. But as for week 1, we should expect him to play the vast majority of snaps, if not every snap, and to be calling the plays on defense. And I also want to say, quick note, Underdog Fantasy has started adding some IDP player props. And so they have a tackle prop for him, which is, I think, 7 solos and assists combined. So, catch me betting the over on that, because I think Alex Anzalone is going to be a full-time player in week 1, and you should be putting in your starting lineup if you've got the space for it. What do you think about that, Jake?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I think it's a great call out on both aspects of it. It's a game that I think easily sees 65 to 70 snaps, and then you're talking 7 tackles. That's a 10% tackle efficiency. You're below basically league average for linebackers at that point. So yeah, I mean, how is that not an over for Anzalone, and a great opportunity here to start him week 1, and you gotta love playing guys in the island games too. So it gives you a greater reason and excitement to watch those games. So with that said, I'm looking at the other linebacker there that you did mention, Jack Campbell. I think he's still a viable option here as the LB2 on this defense. Probably more likely a fringe LB3 in your rosters and lineups. But the biggest thing is you just really want to watch his usage this year. He's a viable player this week, but it's going to come down to watch the snap counts and watch how they shift throughout the year. This is one where I'm kind of making that call, that distinction, that by the bye week for the Lions, this could be something where these roles are flipping between Anzalone and Campbell. So he's viable this week, but let's see where he ends up by year's end.
I'm so excited to see just what kind of player he develops into. I mean, when you take a first round linebacker, and unless you're the Cardinals, they end up being a pretty exciting player a lot of the time. As I glance over at my Zaven Collins jersey. Anyways, we can go ahead and move on from that conversation. A couple other dudes I guess we could shout out. Just they have a couple exciting defensive backs. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, you're starting him. Let's be honest. He was probably taken as a DB1, so he's healthy. He's going to play. Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch are 2 other guys that are probably a lot deeper in leagues, but could still be in contention for starting opportunities depending on how deep your league is. How do you feel about Brian Branch's upside in week 1, Jake? Do you think he's going to be a full-time player, or where is he going to play? What kind of vibes are you catching about this?
Yeah, I've been really big on the belief that he's going to be the starting slot corner, or that slot defender, I should say. I don't want to peg him as a corner because so many platforms have him all over the place. So that might dictate some of the value and how you're able to play him too in terms of your lineups. But yeah, I think that Brian Branch is going to be a full-time starter in that defense right off the bat, and it's going to come in that nickel defender role. I'm excited for it. That's what he did in Alabama. He was successful with it. And I think that the Lions have a plan for him, and we're going to see it from week 1 here. So wheels up for Brian Branch for the season, even as a rookie. What that relates to your lineups, again, probably maybe something a little more fringe worthy in that, 3rd tier type of level for now. But I'm excited to watch Branch on Thursday night here.
Me too, man. Me too. I just have the rookie fever. That's one of the best things about football is it's like opening your Christmas presents, right? Like the draft is, I mean, I guess the draft is Christmas. You get to see what your presents are, but like NFL season is getting to play with your presents. You know what I mean? Like now you actually get to see just how fast your Hot Wheels cars go, just how far your Nerf gun shoots. I'm an adult, I promise, but every now and then you gotta reminisce on the past. Let's go ahead and talk about the Chiefs. This is a really interesting situation for them. Obviously, the news coming out today about Travis Kelce's knee hyperextension. And listeners, hey, if you haven't heard about that yet, don't start him week 1. But Chris Jones is holding out. It just seems like the Chiefs every single year, they just kind of coast through the first half of the season, and then they're like, okay, I guess we can start trying now. This game is going to be interesting without Travis Kelce, most likely without Chris Jones, unless he gets signed to a contract within the next 2 days. I'm a little concerned about George Karlaftis because he's kind of a borderline guy. You may start him, you may not. But if Chris Jones is out, and we already know that Charles Omenihu is being suspended, and it's against a really solid offensive line, like you could take this one of 2 ways. You could take this as George Karlaftis isn't competing with very many other guys, so the likelihood that he soaks up whatever production is available is very high, which is a valid argument to make. But on the other side, you could also say, but it's also likely that that defensive line is just less productive overall because they're missing that much talent. I'm curious what you think about that before you get to go into a guy that you're a little more high on. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely lean towards the latter there. I think this is something where week 1 is always the hardest for all fantasy players, but especially even more on the IDP side of things. It's so hard for us to find the information. We have to do a lot of projecting, and try to really figure things out. So to go in there and say, all right, someone's working in a lesser situation, and now we're going to project, an unproven asset to be more successful all of a sudden, just purely based on volume. It's harder to get behind that, especially in the defensive line space where talent is one of the bigger success indicators for IDP than it is any other spot on the field. So for me, I would lean away from Karlaftis at this point. This is not to fade him, overall. This is just, it's a tough matchup to start. It's a tough situation to be in, and so for me, I would be fading him. But again, if you gotta put him into your roster due to whatever makeup of your team, you can at least again hope for the volume sake of it, right? He can maybe pile up 3-4 tackles, and maybe work his way into a big play at some point. But I wouldn't feel good or safe about it.
I will say we are going to get to see a lot of Felix and Yudike Uzoma right out the gate this season. So we're going to just get to evaluate his talent pretty quickly here. A guy I do like a lot is Willie Gay. He was pretty impressive down the stretch last season, and I believe managers might be a little bit low on him simply because it appears to be a crowded room. But make no mistake, he is the number 2 there, and he will be playing number 2 snaps. And it's going to be a matchup that likely will play a lot of snaps. So even if he's not playing a full-time role, he could still be playing a lot of snaps. So, is he a linebacker 2? Is he a linebacker 3? Maybe not. But if you're in a league where you start, 4 or 5 linebackers potentially, or you just need a guy with a lot of upside, Willie Gay could definitely be a reasonable option in this matchup.
I like that. Totally agree with you. Availability is key for him. And when he's had it, he's shown a reason why that they spent decent draft capital on him a few years back, and I'm totally with you. I'm excited for Willie Gay this season. It'll be interesting to see and exciting to see a Spagnuolo defense potentially run out 2 primary linebackers for the bulk of the season too, assuming health with Bolton and Gay. So. But someone else from that defense that I'm also very excited about this year, and especially in this matchup, Justin Reed, someone who had just really good, strong box usage last year for us, which we love the sweet spot, but the box is definitely one of those spots where that adds even greater value for us overall, especially from those safeties and those defensive backs. And I just think this projects to be a strong matchup in a team that the Lions likely aren't going to be attacking as much downfield, just with the limited weapons that they have. And using the assets they do have on offense, they're more likely to attack the middle of the field or the short area of the field where someone coming up to play in that box with good range like Justin Reed, would find the way to be successful in there. So I like his alignment and usage there, and I think the matchup just plays into his favor a little bit more as well. So I think he's a great play for us here in week 1.
I will also say a storyline that will be good to watch is the usage for Trent McDuffie versus L'Jarius Sneed. You have written here he's dealing with an injury, so we might not see him at his best, but where he lines up should still be something that is predictable throughout the rest of the season. And I know how much you love Trent McDuffie. You've infected me, and I now love him as well. So I've been taking him in a lot of these drafts, so I'm excited to see if he continues to have that great usage that he had last year where he was playing in the slot. So we'll, take a gander at that game log after week 1 and see what happens. You ready to move into the next game?
Absolutely. Let's keep it rolling.
Awesome. So now we have Sunday morning. Some of the best football, man. Some of the best football memories. Week 1, Sunday morning, just nothing like it. Popping on Red Zone, which, by the way, Red Zone is now on NFL Plus. So I will now have I'll now have Red Zone. Nobody will talk to me the entirety of Sunday. I apologize. But the Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons is the first game we're talking about for Sunday morning. The over-under is only 39.5, which is a pretty low over-under for week 1. That's not going to have a lot of upside, assuming that the Lions know what they're talking about, which isn't always the case, but just keep that in mind. There is a chance that there are just fewer snaps played in general for this game. Also worth noting, the Carolina Panthers offensive line is ranked 16th according to PFF, very middle of the pack. Not really a deal breaker here, but the Atlanta offensive line is ranked 7th. So perhaps a slight negative matchup for the Carolina defensive line. But let's start off with the Panthers, man. They have a lot of really interesting players, but somebody that I would like to talk about first is actually Von Bell. And the reason I want to talk about Von Bell is simply because of his incredibly good preseason usage. He was the guy that was playing a lot of really valuable snaps, playing closer to the line of scrimmage. And that makes sense. It's a new coaching staff. They brought him in free agency. Obviously, they brought him in with a plan, and they are going to execute on that plan. So that's good. However, as I'm sure you'll get into, that means bad things for somebody else in that same room. So what would you like to add here in this situation?
I mean, I'll just jump right into it. I mean, it's Jeremy Chin, right? I mean, his usage, just in terms of alignment, you know, and overall snap numbers are very concerning. We can definitely find, safeties who live more in that slot defender role and make, make a name for themselves and be very IDP relevant. But if they're not filling the rest of those snaps in overall, and there's Von Bell and Xavier Woods out there already gobbling up so many of those other safety snaps that it's hard to say that Chin is going to be out there at a rate that's going to make him successful and sustainable overall. Maybe in those best ball formats he can find a way to do that because he's been a playmaker at times in the past, but when you got to set your lineup every week, I don't feel comfortable plugging this guy in every week at this point. And again, what we talked about in the last matchup, week one, is it's so hard to work with a limited set of information, but what the information we do have is not positive overall for Chin for week one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear you. Obviously, Frankie Louvu, Shaq Thompson, those linebackers, if you got them, you're probably starting them because you paid the price that requires you to do that. But real quick on the defensive line, we've had some recent news with Brian Burns holding out. How does that impact some of the rest of the guys on that defensive line?
They don't have a lot of depth there already. I mean, and you can see that in the fact that they had a second round pick in Yatir Gross Matos, a few years back, get plenty of run last year, and they're like, nope, we're going to bring in Justin Houston because that's the better option. Someone who's shown to be very effective in limited snaps, even as much as last year. Still, I think there's some potential available or ability there to deliver, but I don't feel great plugging these guys into my lineup. Derek Brown's a solid option in DT required leagues. He's made the steps year over year that he is a viable IDP option as well, not just a valid defensive tackle in the NFL where he's played well. But I like the tackle floor for Derek Brown in a matchup where the run rate, run over pass rate is going to be a better one for the Falcons. They've shown us with an Arthur Smith offense. That's just what they're going to do. So I like that. And that's probably about it. I mean, Justin Houston maybe as a very late dart throw. Burns is obviously plug and play if he's there. But that defensive front's kind of a big mystery and potentially could go to pieces quickly without Brian Burns there.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. People get so excited bringing in a rookie quarterback. Hey, they're turning around the franchise, but there's a lot more to having a good team than having a good quarterback and a couple exciting offensive fantasy assets. This defense is still going to need some development, especially on that defensive line. Talking about a defense that needed some development, they got it. They added so much this offseason, and that's the Atlanta Falcons. I am really, really excited to see. I mean, obviously, Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to lie, but this is an IDP podcast. So I'm excited to see just how much that defense gets bolstered by all of the additions that they made in the draft and in free agency. But there is one player that I'm probably more excited about than any of the other ones. And I know you're thinking I'm going to say Troy Anderson, but I'm actually going to say Caden Ellis, the other linebacker, because he is the guy. You planted your flag on him, right? Was that you? Yeah. So I feel bad. I think I'm sniping him from you, but I mean, I'm just agreeing with the smart guy. That's good. It's a great way to make yourself look smart, right? Troy Anderson is, I mean, sorry, not Troy Anderson. He's good too, but Caden Ellis is the guy that has more experience. He's got a lot of pass rush upside, like you have noted, and he's going to be wearing the green dot most likely. And I just wanted to give myself a quick shout out and say I drafted him in the IDP Invitational extremely late. There are very few linebackers that seem to be as obvious league winners just based on their expected production versus where they're going in drafts. And Caden Ellis is absolutely that guy. So anywhere you have him rostered, you're almost certainly starting him this week, unless you're playing in one of those like start two IDP leagues. And if you are, please be better. Just fix it. Add like 9 more spots, please. Jake, obviously you love Caden Ellis. I'm not going to lie. But who else here in this matchup are you interested in, or is there somebody you're a little concerned about?
From the defensive line perspective, Bud Dupree, Lorenzo Carter are people who have shown flashes at time for us. I mean, Bud Dupree had a great year for your Steelers even at one point. This is a matchup where the Panthers, a middle of the pack line, offensive line in terms of PFF rankings, but it's definitely been a talking point for their offseason here too. So maybe those are probably more like dart throw type plays when you got a deeper lineup that you're starting, DL4 type of range. But Grady Jarrett's one that I'm actually really excited about because now that they have, even if Bud Dupree and Lorenzo Carter and others, Calais Campbell aren't people we're looking at necessarily starting, they actually bring a level of competency I feel like they did not have last year even. So that gives Grady Jarrett, I think, a chance to be the Grady Jarrett who earned the huge contract 2-3 years ago, and can bring himself back into IDP relevance, not just in DT required leagues, but also even as a DL2 or DL3 type play. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like. And obviously, yes, Ellis and others bringing additional pressure off the edge. Ryan Nielsen was a fantastic in what he did in terms of creating sacks and pressures in his 6 years in New Orleans. So hopefully he brings that over here, and that gives the defensive secondary a chance to shine even more. So in that backfield, is there anyone you're looking at in particular?
Yeah, man. Richie Grant versus Jesse Bates III, the great duel of our time. I remember we were talking about both of these guys when we were talking about our Dynasty defensive backs episode. I believe I was much higher on Jesse Bates. I don't remember which player you liked more. Were you also team Jesse Bates?
I'm team Atlanta secondary, I guess. I like them
That's fair.
both, but if I had to pick, right, I'm leaning Grant at this point just because I am excited to see that I think he'll get a better box snap count and our utilization this season in Ryan Nielsen's defense. But again, projection at this point, week 0, right? We're not even in week 1 yet. So that said, Bates has done it for so many years so successfully. If someone said you're an idiot, it's Jesse Bates, I wouldn't disagree with them.
Jake, you talking while holding a pencil just makes me respect what you're saying so much more. Like, I already am totally locked in, but just like the pencil in your hand, I'm like, yes, professor, continue. I'm locked in with the glasses. This is an audio show. Thank you for listening. But you can also watch on YouTube, you guys. So if you would like to see Jake and his Professor Jake form, tune in on the YouTube at the IDP show. I really like Jesse Bates, but I'm totally on board with you. We're just going to have to see how the usage pans out week 1, but both guys are great. Let's be honest. You're probably starting them if you drafted them. Let's go ahead and move on to the next game. The Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. That game has an over-under of 44 points. Pretty normal, pretty middle of the pack, maybe a little on the higher side. But what is interesting to note is the disparity in the offensive line ranks. The Cincinnati Bengals have an offensive line ranking of 17th, which is pretty middle of the pack, but the Cleveland Browns have an offensive line rank of number 2. So, what does that mean for the Bengals defensive line? It might be a tough day for them. We'll find out. It really all hinges on whether or not Deshaun Watson, continues to have turned into a pumpkin, or if, he is that. I'm not sure that's quite the right way to use that analogy, but I think you get what I mean. I mean, we've all seen the movie. Is he a pumpkin? Is he still a chariot? We'll find out. But let's go ahead and talk about the guys on the defensive side of the ball. For starters, let's talk about the Bengals. And I'll make sure I don't snipe your guy, but somebody that I'm really excited about is, I'd love to say Jordan Battle, but I just don't know if he's going to have a full-time role week 1. So I'll have to go ahead and just go with Jermaine Pratt because they re-signed him. They brought him back. I feel like worst case scenario, he has the usage that he had last season, which made him a part-time linebacker. He's playing anywhere between like 65 to 80% of snaps, if my memory serves me right. And I think that's a floor projection. I think that, if they paid him as much money as they did, which, like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like bank breaking, but the fact that they brought him back shows that they want him on that team and they liked him in that role. They definitely would not give him fewer snaps than last year. If anything, they would give him more snaps. So I'm hoping that he can be a productive, linebacker 4, linebacker 5 type in your deeper leagues. In our best ball leagues, where I actually don't know if I've drafted him in at all, but either way, Jermaine Pratt, he's a guy that I'm a little bit higher on this week just to see how his usage looks compared to last season. I know you have a guy here that if I would love to take him, but I will respect the highlight in the doc and let you talk about this next guy.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's Dax Hill. He's someone I was pretty high on coming into the season. Making the speculation that they're going to move on from at least Von Bell or Jesse Bates. In this case, it was both. So it was the and clause versus the or there. But I just like that he has the ability to line up, in the slot. I know they got Mike Hilton there, but just having defenders with that level of versatility, I think, add value to them and make them that much more likely to be on the field 100% of the time or near 100%, as well as get the better, more valuable alignments for IDP closer to the line of scrimmage when it comes to defensive back. So I think, this game, so it's a little iffy because we don't know which Deshaun Watson we're getting. Like you said, he looked a little rough at the end of last year. Had a couple games where he looked okay, but if you get this offense back to competent, he's a strong starting option for defensive back for us this week. They should be able to move the ball well against the defense that was a good defense last year, but it had its holes. So I'm big on Dax Hill for week 1 here. And I would be comfortable playing him in a lot of situations.
And I'm really not concerned about his usage because Nick Scott was a deep safety with the Rams last season, and the only other guy that would potentially be on the field would be Jordan Battle, who was also a deep safety in college. So either way, Dax Hill's running bait is going to be somebody that tends to be somebody that was at least previously used farther away from the line of scrimmage. So that seems to imply Dax Hill is going to be the guy that if they need somebody to play closer to the line of scrimmage more consistently, that's his job. Nothing crazy to mention about Sam Hubbard or Trey Hendrickson. Really, what I'm interested in to see is just how many snaps they're losing to Joseph Osai or Miles Murphy, but we'll just see how it goes. I'm not uber excited about either guy, but they're more deeper plays, kind of like DL2s, just kind of like how they've historically been. Anybody else we want to talk about on the Bengals before we move into the Browns?
Nope, not at all. The only thing I'll say is that, from a time to throw perspective, Deshaun Watson is one of those quarterbacks who historically tends to hold the ball longer, which even in better offensive line situations does sometimes lend yourself to, find ways for the defense to rack up 1 or 2 sacks still. So, I mean, if you got big play scoring and you want to shoot for that upside with this defensive front and a Hubbard or Hendrickson, I can get it, but yeah, I mean, I'm with you that I'm probably fading them a bit for this matchup here in week 1.
Awesome. On to the other half for the battle for Ohio. We have the Cleveland Browns. Can I get that branded, please? I feel like we could get some people hyped about that.
I just feel really dumb that I did not realize that both these teams were from Ohio when we were putting.
I forget that all the time, but I apologize in advance to our listeners from Ohio. Ohio is the definition of mid, just like as a state. So, as somebody who has been there a couple times, I love you, Ohio. I'm sorry, but let's go ahead and talk about the defensive players just taking shots out of nowhere. I'm so sorry. I love Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. This is his season. I'm not planting my flag on him, but if I could plant one of those little cocktail umbrellas. If I could plant a cocktail umbrella on Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I would go ahead and do that. So this is such a good. I'm sorry. He's going to get great usage. He's going to get a lot of snaps. They lost Jacob Phillips, Sion Takitaki. He's still recovering from injury. I don't know how many snaps he's going to play. It's JOK and it's Anthony Walker, and I mean, I'm okay with either guy. I think you might prefer Anthony Walker, but I just believe JOK has a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. He's going to be playing all over the field. He's going to be making plays, just all the stereotypical jargon, associated with, I don't have a stronger statistically backed argument, so I'm just going to say all these things. He's got that dog in him, and I think that's a strong enough case to make. So, Jake, I'm sure you have some data to share with us.
I thought he had the umbrella in him, the tiny umbrella, but he's got the dog and the umbrella now. So this is good visuals for me. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm with you in terms of Owusu Koroma or JOK, right? Like I like that, but I mean, the Browns linebacker room is another one where it's been so ambiguous and so inconsistent, and a large part of that's been injury. But I mean, you've already started rattling them off that they've already experienced. I'd lean Walker if I had to at this point. I think I think they're going to find a way to keep the linebackers more clean than they have in the previous years. It was a defense predicated on speed, and that's how they intentionally built it out. But they didn't do enough to support that from the first level, right? The defensive standpoint. And this year they made those investments, right? Dalvin Tomlinson, and guys, is it Sheldon Richardson? I'm blanking now. I think on the other D tackle they brought in late, but they did these types of things to make sure that they can actually allow the second level to operate cleanly. And I think JOK and Walker do that. And if they're the guys that stay healthy and they're out there, definitely better than last year. But again, I'm probably staying away from them at this point. I don't know. I just get 49ers running back room vibes from this. Like can't stay healthy for more than 3 weeks at a time. I don't know, but so it'll be interesting to see.
Man just said gives 49ers running back. All right. Zadarius Smith, defensive end. He's going to be pretty productive on this defensive line opposite Myles Garrett, we would expect, assuming he's healthy. Also, shout out Grant Delpit. Should continue to be a strong safety with this new defensive scheme. Like you said, linebacker room didn't really get much better. If at all, it maybe just got worse or just kind of returned to last season. But yeah, he's going to continue to be productive. I think we can go ahead and move on to this next game and keep this episode chugging along. And now we'll talk about a very, very exciting team. And Josh Raymer, plug your ears, a team that's going to need a little bit more time, but could still have some exciting elements. The Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts. That has an over-under of 45.5 points. Now let's talk about their offensive lines. Jacksonville, their offensive line is ranked number 26. That's bottom quartile? Is that how math works? That's
I think
something like that. That's like, whatever. It's not a great offensive line. And the Colts offensive line is ranked number 10. I'm interested to see how that actually pans out. I'm sure PFF knows more than I do, but last season that was iffy. So, Colts defensive linemen might have a little bit of a plus matchup. Jags defensive linemen, maybe a little bit of a down matchup, but not really a big deal. Let's go ahead and talk about some guys on the Jags that were a little higher or a little lower on. Man, I feel like the Jags defense is one of the most at market defenses in the league. I'll probably think of somebody else later, but I like the values of all the guys. I think they're all pretty respectable values, and they usually just have guys on the field that play, and then they have guys that really don't. And so if you drafted a guy, you're probably know more or less what to expect from him. So I'm just going to go ahead and say Devin Lloyd, because I really want to see if he actually, has consistent full-time usage. I'm expecting that. I'm hoping that last season was more of an anomaly where he lost a little bit of playing time. I think this year he should be pretty consistently solid, which is why I've been drafting him in a lot of these best ball drafts. Jake, how do you feel about that?
No, I like that. And I think that's where he'll slot in. There's been talk of his increased pass rushing upside, which I know the defensive coordinator coming from Tampa Bay last season, and what they did with Devin White and Levante David there, you kind of hope for that. I would just a little bit of caution, right? I mean, the PFF grades looked a little rough towards the back half. The lost snaps, he did talk about, hey, I was just worn out, right? I wasn't used to an NFL season, the rigors of it. So I'm okay plugging him in there at that level, but I would be looking down the the line to make sure I had a backup plan too.
Yeah, that's fair. And how about a guy that you are really, really interested in this matchup?
For me, that's Trayvon Walker, right? I mean, obviously the big name, the big draft capital. I think that's something that, when I've looked at first round draft capital defensive linemen over the past few years, we have seen historically that they consistently move up year over year. And this is someone who he started off with respectable numbers, right? He wasn't doing anything elite, but he was hitting all the marks at or above average for the rest of the league in terms of, pass rush, pressure rate, win rates, tackle efficiency. And that means he's on pace, right? And that's exactly what a lot of people talked about. He was a project, a little bit raw. They had to develop him. So I think they found out what they want to do with him now and how they're going to use him. And so I'm excited to see what that equates to. I'm a little iffy on the number 10 ranking for the Colts offensive line as well, like you kind of said before. So I think this is a good week for Walker to kind of maybe show out and maybe help correct that Indianapolis Colts PFF ranking.
Yeah, expose them, call them out. I like it. Let's go ahead and talk about those very Colts. Man, this defense, I will say, has a lot of exciting talent on it. And one of the players that I'm most excited for on that defense is Julian Blackmon. They're supposed, not really supposed, I mean, it's been announced and talked about openly. They're new strong safety. And there are very few strong safety roles in all of football that are as nice as this one. I don't really know a better way to phrase that. Strong safeties in this defensive scheme get great usage. Did I plant my flag on Julian Blackmon? I might have. I might not have. I I I'm gonna have to check my notes on this because it's pretty bad if I don't remember. But if I didn't, I'll go ahead and plant a little cocktail umbrella on him just in case. I think he's going to be incredibly productive as early as week 1, assuming he's healthy, which I'm pretty sure he is. He's going to have really, really good usage, and he is so freaking cheap. You could probably get him off your waiver wire right now, unless you have me in your league, because I already got him. So just keep that in mind. He's going to have great usage, and he's going to be very productive. All right, Jake, what's a guy you are really excited about in this matchup?
For me, it's Kwity Paye. I think that's someone who, had again talked about high draft capital defensive linemen and what they do. I think this is just something where against a Jacksonville team that has some legitimate concerns in their defensive or their offensive line at the edges there. I really think this is an opportunity for Paye to come out and make his stamp on 2023, how it's going to be a great year for him. DeForest Buckner is obviously someone else who's a pretty much plug and play, and especially in DT required leagues. But don't be afraid of them in those DL only leagues. On a platform like Sleeper. And then along with it, they have Grover Stewart too, who's coming off kind of a breakout year for himself last year, Pro Bowler, and I think this is just one where probably more of a streaming option in this matchup. But because of the matchup, I think you could definitely go ahead and stream someone like Grover Stewart.
Absolutely. Grover Stewart, incredibly underrated interior defensive lineman. And yes, Julian Blackmon was one of my flag plants this year, but I'm going to go ahead and let him keep the cocktail umbrella because I like him that much. Let's give a quick shout out to Kenny Moore. I think he had a down year last year. I don't think he did. He did have a down year last year. He's going to get a lot better this year because simply him being healthy is going to be enough for him to be better this year. And also keep an eye on Shaquille Leonard's concussion recovery status. If he's back, he's back. If he's not, EJ Speed could very well be a linebacker 1 in week 1, and that is not a hot take. So keep an eye on EJ Speed. Maybe just pick him up now just in case. And then if he breaks out week 1 or, just has one great week, great, trade him. Because if Shaquille Leonard comes back, I don't think EJ Speed's going to score basically any points. I think we can go ahead and move on to the next game. What say you?
I say we shall.
Wow, that was pretty nice. All right, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Minnesota Vikings. That is going to be an over-under of 45.5 points. Both of these teams have pretty much the same offensive line. The Bucs have number 14. The Vikings have number 15. Nothing notable about these offensive lines. We'll see how it looks after week 1. But I do want to call out a couple dudes on the Tampa Bay defense. Obviously, you're starting Devin White. You're starting Levante David. I will say Levante David has had a great value just because his ADP has been a lot lower this year than all the other years. But a guy that I really like in this matchup is Joe Tryon-Shoyinka because he's young, he's developing, and I think that this could be a season that he actually makes a big enough jump that it matters. We've seen an upward trajectory from a lot of those guys in that same class. I mean, Kwity Paye was in that class. Jalen Phillips was in that class, right? I mean, that was a really, really strong defensive line class. Azeez Ojulari was in that class too, right?
I believe so. I think Peyton Turner too, but I don't want to hurt your case, so I won't say that out loud.
Justice for Peyton Turner. It's not his fault. He just hasn't gotten the snaps. He's been hurt. Okay, I'm sorry, Saints fans. I'm just defending your boy. But yeah, Joe Tryon Shoyinka. I mean, it's not the hottest take. I like him in best ball. I think he's going to continue to get better, and I would like to see what he can do in this matchup. So, I'll just give him a quick shout out.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, and it's going to be something where he's a strong volume play. I know they drafted Kalijah Cansey. They have Vita Vea, and Shaq Barrett's coming off of a serious Achilles injury. But beyond that, the depth there isn't fantastic. So I think this is something where those are the guys who you're going to see get a lot of run, and they're going to get a high volume of snap counts that we love to see, that 700-800 plus range, and that can make guys very viable in matchups. And this is kind of a middling matchup offensive line wise, but just the pass rate of the Vikings overall, I think I'm in on both Shaq Barrett and Joe Tryon Shoyinka. Totally understand the wait and see approach with the Achilles injury for Barrett for some, but I'm comfortable slotting him in along with Joe Tryon Shoyinka this week.
Okay, then, and how about a guy that you actually are pretty excited about? I'm in agreement with you on this one, by the way. I love this guy, so let's hear about him.
I think that's Ryan Neal, right? So, I mean, I think we really loved what he showed us in Seattle last year, coming in relief of Jamal Adams. And he's just such a strong, consistent tackler. He always seems to be in the presence of the ball. I know that he is a, kind of more of that prototypical box safety type of player. But the guy has a nose for the ball. And I picked up in a lot of leagues. And so maybe I have that, fan bias in that regard, but he was fun to watch last year, and he was a consistent IDP performer for us. So going into a defense where there's an opportunity that offense struggles, I think you could see a lot of work from this defense, and you're going to need players like Ryan Neal to step up and become a significant contributor for them.
You know what I just realized? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers replaced Keanu Neal with Ryan Neal. Means absolutely nothing, but now you know. Let's go ahead and talk about the Vikings. There are quite a few players on this team that I'm really excited about, and there are a couple players on this team that I've actually been cooling on really, really early on in the offseason. I'm talking like February and, like March-ish. I was really into Brian Asamoah because his ADP was so low. But as we've kind of progressed through the offseason, I've kind of cooled on that entire bunch. I mean, shout out Ivan Pace for apparently earning the at worst linebacker 3 job there. But I mean, we've talked about in depth how Brian Flores's defensive scheme tends to lead to a lower tackle efficiency for linebackers. So that's one thing worth noting. But also, I still don't really know who's going to be on the field in one linebacker sets. And that is slightly concerning to me. Now, I do believe that's baked into their ADP, but even still, there are other guys going around them that I would just prefer. Shout out Caden Ellis, or, just other guys going around like Kaiser White, perhaps. All that to say, if you drafted him, I'm sure you're probably in a situation where you need to start them. I would just, maybe be a little bit hesitant. If you've got somebody else and you want a tiebreaker, maybe this is your sign to just let them cook on the back burner for just a little bit week 1. Jake, am I totally off base here? What do you think?
No, there's not a large amount of IDP value to be recognized here or be realized at this time. Harrison Smith is probably the one that stands out the most to me. Just showed, strong play last year still, even at his age, coming into his 30s here. But just the way that, Brian Flores likes to utilize his safety closer to the line of scrimmage, I think that he's someone that will find a way to continually be involved and make plays for us, especially in some of that big play potential. So he's kind of the big name I'm looking at there. Everyone else kind of becomes more of a fringe play. I think he's probably locked in for now, but again, like you said, there's some concerns. So, probably shying away from some of those things unless you've already got them and you need to plug them in. It's an okay week to do it. But yeah, everyone else, Cam Bynum, Byron Murphy, deeper plays. I want to see what happens there first. Same for even Marcus Davenport and Dean Lowry. Like, probably Davenport has a little bit better chance from the edge position, but I'm holding off and waiting to see what we get from these guys in terms of production and alignment and usage.
I will say I'm continuing to pay my penance to the Saints fans. Well, I guess not, because I was going to say Marcus Davenport's actually a guy that I really like, but I know for a fact Saints fans do not like Marcus Davenport. So maybe I shouldn't say too many nice things about him. But he's been a guy that I've been drafting quite a bit of. I think he's shown enough talent for me to believe that he is somebody who, he just has staying power in the league. I think one of the best arguments you can make generally in situations of ambiguity is, what kinds of reasonable excuses can you make for players? And I think there are some really bad excuses that you can make, but I also think that there are some really good excuses you can make. And for Marcus Davenport, I think health has been a very reasonable excuse to make for him. He hasn't really been all that healthy, but when he's been on the field, he's been productive. I don't think that that has anything to do with his talent. And so I'm not going to take away from what I believe he can do on the field by saying he can't do it when he's not on the field. You get what I mean, right? Like,
Yep.
I'm not going to downgrade a player's talent simply because they have injury issues. So sure, injury issues are baked into his ADP, but I think he's a pretty talented player. So he's going to be a guy I'll be excited to watch this season. But I don't think we need to spend too much more time on this matchup. Let's go ahead and move into the Tennessee Titans. And oh, look at that, the New Orleans Saints. Now, this game is an over-under of 41.5. Understandably so. Neither of these teams are all that exciting, but we'll probably find some good value here and there. The first guy I want to talk about just out the gate is Azeez Al-Shaair. Azeez Al-Shaair, the guy that I listed as my IDP MVP 2 years ago, now he's finally getting a shot as a starter, and he absolutely deserves it. He's been playing as the linebacker 3 in San Francisco for a very long time, and he has waited his time, and now his time has come. Azeez Al-Shaair is going to be a full-time player. I believe he's going to be very productive. Basically, just see him as David Long from last year, but healthier. That's a great player. Do I need to say more? I mean, that's pretty much it.
Nope, you nailed it. And he's got a chance to be a plug and play each week, top 24 type player, locked in at that linebacker spot, with even more ceiling. And I don't want to say he could become elite, but he could really do some amazing things this year with this opportunity. And he can really make a name for himself in the IDP space, like his teammate Kevin Byard, who traditionally played more as a deep safety. But after last year, showed us that he can do a lot too with some amazing box usage. And if that can stick around for this year, he's someone that has the potential to be elite and lock in as well. So the only other person from that defensive backfield that I'm interested in, and it's more only for cornerback required, but maybe worth watching to see for a potential DB play, is Roger McCreary. So could get some really nice slot defensive alignment there, and just kind of a name that I think overall will get a chance to be on the field and make plenty of plays and opportunities for his team. So keep an eye on Roger McCreary this week, but probably not looking to play him.
I know you have one more shout out that you want to make. I want to give a quick shout out to Amani Hooker. He was pretty injured last year. When he played, he was productive. He should be productive again this year. I have an absurdly high exposure to him in best ball, like top 4. So there's a reason I'm calling him out, is because I am personally invested in his success. That's it. Give your quick shout out, and then we'll move on to New Orleans.
I love it. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons is elite. You got to be playing him. I don't care, DT required, DL, whatever. Get him in there. So, and it's a great matchup against a New Orleans offensive line where the interior is probably the weaker part of it, and it's already a weaker unit overall. So,
yeah, speaking of which, I forgot to give the matchup grades. New Orleans has an offensive line that is rated number 24, which isn't great, but it's decent compared to the Titans' offensive line, which is ranked dead last. So pray for Ryan Tannehill, you guys. Let's go ahead and talk about the New Orleans Saints. They have a couple pretty exciting players all across the board, some dudes that have been in the league for a very, very long time and are still chugging around. But a guy that I really like, actually. This is actually really interesting. I want to see what Marcus May does. He's been injured a ton last year, and I'm just gonna go digging for gold, because I I've drafted him a ton in these best ball drafts. So yes, I'm personally invested in his success. I'll admit it, you guys. I'm exposing myself. But he was good last year when he played, when he was healthy. So the same argument that I made for Marcus Davenport, I'm making for this Marcus too. He might be injured, but I'm not taking that away from his talent. And I believe that when he's on the field, he's a productive safety. So just quick shout out to Marcus May. You may not be starting him because he went really, really late in drafts, but at least, keep an eye on how he does week 1, just in case you need an injury fill in week 2 or something.
I love the call out. I personally would stay away. I get where you're coming from again. I'm just still stuck on the fact that you said you're exposing yourself. So I just hope that there's no children listening and hearing about you exposing yourself here on this audio podcast. But check us out on YouTube if you want as well for Evan exposing himself. With that said, what I'd like to expose is that Tennessee defensive or offensive line, Cam Jordan and Carl Granderson. I think they're names that I might not necessarily go after normally, but in this matchup, I don't know how you can't. Tennessee is probably likely to get slaughtered up front, even with an aging Cam Jordan and Carl Granderson. So, and throw in a little bit of, pass rush upside from Demario Davis. Probably like him more for that big play side of it, less in terms of that tackle floor. If you're looking for that, who might you want to check out though from the New Orleans side?
I haven't listened to a word you said for the last 2 minutes. Who did you not talk about? Have you talked about Pete Werner yet? Have you talked about Demario Davis
Werner,
yet?
Let's talk about Pete Werner.
All right, let's go. Yeah, Pete Werner. He has a very high tackle efficiency. Last season, he did not play 100% of snaps consistently, but it didn't matter. He still crushed it. So if that's his floor, I'm happy with it. I think his ADP was too high for best ball, but that's just my opinion. If you have him, you're starting him. He's a great player at the end. Can we move on, please?
Let's move on.
Let's move on to the next matchup. All right, San Francisco 49ers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, baby. That's going to be an exciting one. I always say I'm not like a real Yinzer. I'm not like a full-on Steelers fan, but man, watching their preseason games has me at an unhealthy level of hype. Nothing like watching your starters play against third strings from 3 different teams 3 weeks in a row and absolutely dice them up because, surely that's what the regular season is going to be like, right? Anyways, this is an IDP podcast. The San Francisco offensive line is ranked 18th. What the heck? The 49ers offensive line is ranked 18th and the Steelers is ranked 12th. PFF's actually giving Pittsburgh some love. All right. I don't believe it. I think I'm in an alternate universe right now, but I talked about the over-under, right? 40.5. It's a little low.
Now.
Let's go ahead and talk about some 49ers. Drake Jackson. That's a guy I'm going to call out. Nick Bosa is threatening holding out. I have no idea if he's playing week 1 or not. Mike Tomlin said he is preparing for Nick Bosa, but that means absolutely nothing. Diddly squat, because of course he is. He's the Steelers head coach. Why would he not be preparing for Nick Bosa? But Drake Jackson is not holding out. He's going to play the game. So either he's playing opposite Nick Bosa, which is great, or Nick Bosa's not in and Drake Jackson's just getting a lot of snaps. But either way, we're going to get to see what the sophomore has to offer for this defensive line. And I personally am really excited about it. How do you feel?
I like Drake Jackson. I was excited about him a lot last year in the limited opportunities he got. The one name that kind of stands out to me, or that I guess maybe caught my eye, right, is, Clelin Ferrell, someone who was very likely overdrafted by the Raiders at that time, but was still drafted in the first round very highly. And, coming to San Francisco, maybe he can, resurrect that career there. So more of a watch, name to see what happens, especially with the Bosa holdup. But really interested to see how that rotation pans out. But another name there in the front in terms of Javon Hargrave. I mean, that defensive required, he's a smash play, but even again outside of that, sleeper playing him as a DL, this is a very strong opportunity. I think Pittsburgh did get better up front, but I don't know that the interior of it's that improved that Hargrave can't find a way to disrupt this gameplay very quickly.
Yeah, unless Marquise Pouncey came out of retirement and like de-aged himself 20 years, that offensive line didn't get that much better. I mean, let's be honest. Let's talk about the Steelers, though. Like we said, their offensive line is ranked 12th. We'll see how that goes. But somebody that I really, really like is Cameron Hayward, because obviously it's Cameron freaking Hayward. That dude is going to be an absolute baller this season. I just pray that he just plays one more season and stays healthy and has fun, because he's a great team leader and he's so freaking good. Like, one of the most underrated interior defensive linemen in football, which feels weird to say considering that he's like still really, really productive and like gets a lot of accolades and respect, but like he's so good. So yeah, I'm a Steelers fan. Get over it. Cameron Hayward, he's great. He's great in DT leagues and he's great in normal leagues. So you should be starting him if you have him, if your league is deep enough.
And shout out Keanu Benton. Like, I think you have Cam Hayward 2.0 right behind him. So just, I love that guy. I want to call that out. Linebacker wise, Cole Holcomb, competent linebacker play for the Steelers. Haven't seen that in a few years, so sign me up. I think he's someone who's a smash play there. But the name behind that, in Landon Roberts, is kind of the sneaky one. I think that's gone under the radar for a lot of people. And if you really need to be able to plug him in as an LB3-4 kind of range, probably closer to the 4 for me personally. But I think you can get away with it, especially in this matchup where San Francisco likes to do a lot of those timing plays and attack the middle of the field where, yeah, they'll probably be successful plays to an extent, but there's still things where, we can pile up some stats for those defenders in the middle, and Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts. My big question is on the back end of that secondary. We know Minkah Fitzpatrick's elite, but who's the other guy back there with him? Do we know for sure? Is it Keanu Neal, who we talked about before? Is it DeMonte Kazi? Is it something else I'm not even aware of?
No idea, man. Let's see how week one looks. I'm a Steelers fan. I don't even know. I will say, if we're calling Keanu Benton the next Cam Hayward, can I call Nick Herbert the next TJ Watt too? Because that would be nice. That'd be so nice. Also, quick shout out to Desmond King joining the Steelers. Omar Khan adding to the secondary. Let's go. Okay, let's move on to the next game. Arizona Cardinals at the Washington Commanders. Over under of 38.5. That is not very exciting. The Cardinals are well on their way to nowhere. And the Washington Commanders are well on their way from anywhere other than Dan Snyder, which is a great place to be. So let's go ahead and talk about the defensive side of the ball. But first, Arizona's offensive line is ranked 31st in the league, which is pretty bad, pretty bad. The Washington Commanders ranked 27th, also pretty bad. So if you got a defensive lineman on either side of the ball, maybe start them this week, because that's going to be a great matchup. As for the Cardinals, I freaking love Kaiser White. He's great. This is the kind of player that you want as a very, very late pickup, that you are going to start every single week and not lose an ounce of sleep because of it, because he's got the green dot. He's going to play 100% of snaps. There is literally nobody else around him competing for playing time, so he's going to get to the ball. He's got familiarity with the defensive scheme. Need I say more? No, I don't, so I won't. Jake, who do you like on this defense?
Nailed it. I'm a huge David Collins fan, so I'm excited to see how he gets utilized here. Is it the true full edge, right? Is it this half hybrid experiment like they did with Parsons? We'll see. And so for that matter, if you gotta plug him in, he's got the DL or DE designation. I think it's worth, you can take a shot as a DL3 here, but I really want to see how they break down this alignment for him, and I honestly at this point I'd just like to see them commit him one way or the other. Move him to edge, leave him as off ball, but it seems like off ball is kind of out of the picture. So just commit him to edge and see what we got there and go from there. In terms of off ball, besides Kaiser White, Chris Barnes is kind of the other name at this point you might want to pay attention to, possibly Josh Woods. Whoever gets that role has a potential of that 70 to 80% snap range. Definitely worth noting and picking up and stashing. Not something with that uncertainty that I'd be looking here for in week one.
I want to take another moment to re-emphasize what you just said for the listeners that might be like driving and kind of zoned out there for a sec. The linebacker 2 in Arizona will likely be either Chris Barnes or Josh Woods. Whoever it is going to be a massive value for fantasy this season, especially in deeper leagues. They are not exciting, but they will score points. So just keep that in mind. Also, quick note, because they traded away Isaiah Simmons, somebody is going to replace him for snaps. So obviously Jalen Thompson and Budda Baker are on the field, but keep an eye out for Antonio Hamilton. He could be an interesting guy. We'll have to just see how the usage looks, who's playing in the slot, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be a lot to figure out with this defense. They're going to figure out who's got that dog in him and who doesn't. What was that Rich Gannon quote? That's his name, right? Rich Gannon?
Jonathan Gannon, the coach?
Yeah, who's Rich Gannon?
That's a former quarterback. I believe he played for the Raiders.
Huh. I don't know why I'm thinking of his name. But anyways, Jonathan Gannon, there was a video about him earlier this week circling the socials about him saying something kind of cringe once again, which I know doesn't surprise anybody, but he was like giving some sort of hype up speech and everybody was like, this would put me to sleep. So,
oh, the fire in your belly. Who took
yeah.
the bus? Blah, blah, blah. Pew, pew, pew.
Pew, pew, pew. The Washington Commanders. Jamin Davis, quick update. His court hearing was scheduled for 2024. So do not anticipate any kind of suspension for him this season. He will play every single game. Just worth noting because I was out here thinking he might legit be going to jail and Cody Barton could be playing a full-time role. That doesn't look like that's going to be happening, but Cody Barton should still be a pretty decent play this season. But the guy that I'm going to talk about is Jartavius Martin. Why? You know, because I have a lot of him in best ball, but also because I believe that the nickel cornerback role in this defense is going to be pretty productive. Now, he's more of a guy that I like for cornerback required leagues, unless you play on my fantasy league, which for some reason they have him listed as a safety, which is stupid because he's a cornerback. But anyways, I wanted to draft him in the IDP Invitational, and he was not a corner, so I didn't do it. But in leagues where he is a cornerback, such as Reality Sports Online, shout out because they are awesome. He's going to be a pretty good option. Who do you like out of these guys? Let's be honest. I know who it is. Yeah.
Heart emoji, Cam Curl. So, I mean, great guy, great player, love it. But really, I'm his running mate in Derek Forrest too. Though I'm very excited about him. I think he's someone who showed the ability to play kind of different spots on the field, not to the alignment usage that we really love to see in that 50% above type range. But just the fact that he can move all over the field, I like that, and I think gives him viability as a DB2 type 3 option as well. And the defense as a whole is just a very strong unit. So, we've talked about it before, but right, the rising tide raises all ships. When you got a strong defensive line, you got competent second level play, maybe plus Cody Barton, and then they revamp their secondary as well. So I think it's just overall. We'll see plenty of production from these guys throughout the season.
All four starters on the defensive line are start worthy, and I think there is no better place to use that excuses argument for than with Chase Young. I might be one of the more high on Chase Young people in the industry, and I don't really have the strongest case for it other than just he's been hurt. People get punished for being hurt so often. And I just think that like we as a community are so fickle when it comes to that kind of stuff. And we're just like really petty. And we're just like, screw it. Yeah, I'm angry at you. I think you're bad because you got hurt a lot. It's like, that's not how football works. Chase Young was a second overall pick for a reason. No, he's not a bust just because he hasn't played much football. He's a good player. And I think this is going to be the season where we see that. And I'm willing to put myself out on that island and say that. So if Chase Young actually ends up just being bad at football, fine. I'll admit I was wrong. But I don't think that being injured is equivalent to being a bad football player. And I don't think that's a hot take either. So let's go ahead and move on to the next matchup. The Houston Texans at the Baltimore Ravens. That game has an over-under of 43.5 points. And wow, this might be the biggest disparity we've seen when it comes to offensive line rankings. The Houston Texans, 25. Baltimore Ravens, 4. Do you remember they just traded for the Steelers center because their own center got hurt, and they have like the same name. It was like Kenyon Green got hurt, and so they added Kendrick Green.
Oh, no, I did not see that. I saw they traded for Josh Jones from the Cardinals, but I did not see the Kenyon. I saw Kenyon Green get hurt, but I did not see the other trade. So no.
Yeah, trading for that guy from the Steelers probably bumped their defensive or their offensive line ranking down like 5 spots. So that's probably why it's down at 25. Hey, man, all right, fine. I'll let you have him. I'll let you have him. I'll go ahead and talk about Jonathan Grenard then. For the Texans defensive line, obviously Will Anderson, great. I would love to see just how much usage Jonathan Grenard gets because, again, I've been taking him a lot in best ball. Yeah. But I think he's a pretty talented player. And this, again, is one of those good when healthy, but injured oft. And I think that I just don't believe in injury prone as a label unless it's a statistically verified high re-injury rate injury, or if your name is Michael Thomas. But Jonathan Grenard is a talented player. I think he's playing opposite Will Anderson, and I think that that's going to lead to him being pretty productive. So that's my take. It's not super hot. I just want to see how many snaps he gets, right? Is he going to be like a 50% snap guy, or is he going to be up there on like the 60, 70%? We will find out after week 1. But the guy that you are talking about is the guy, like, come on, everybody. I want to talk about him. I know you want to talk about him. Let's go ahead and sing his praises. Can you give him a little umbrella too, please?
I think he's got like 7 or 8 flags sticking out of him already. So this is Denzel Perryman, linebacker for the Texans. I think he's just hyper efficient tackler. He's shown it. He did it last year in limited snaps. He got the green dot late in preseason. But this is something where I think we'll see him and Christian Harris both be 90+% snap count guys. So this is just the fact of Perryman's proven he can do it in the NFL. Harris has proven he can score under a 30 in his PFF grade. So between those two things, I think people should know which way to lean to start the season. I've been in on Harris this offseason, grabbing up value where I can on him. But I mean, if you got to make a bet, Perriman's the bet. I mean, it should be pretty obvious and pretty plain to most people paying attention at this point. So,
man, Christian Harris out here catching strays. All right. I will say, noted putting green Denzel Perryman with multiple flags sticking out of him. Let's go ahead and speed on through this episode. Man, there are so many games in week 1. No bye weeks is killer for these weekly preview episodes. So I'm going to have to put myself on 1.25 speed just automatically before the listeners even press the button. The Baltimore Ravens. This is another one of those teams that's a lot like the Jags, where it's like their market value is pretty accurate. I don't really like their defensive linemen. You might feel differently, but Kyle Hamilton, I'm just going to say Kyle Hamilton, smash. I know what you meant, but it's not what I thought. He's a great football player. Let's move on.
Yep. I mean, I'm with you. I'm there. Owe is probably the one I'll take a shot at on the defensive line, but I'm not looking to plug guys in here week 1 with that level of uncertainty. So, yeah, I honestly, Marcus Williams on the back half of that defense, I'm just not confident in that matchup against Houston and CJ Stroud either. That Williams is going to have enough volume to validate putting him in your starting lineup in week 1. You could get him in there in the back, end of a DB3 type of situation, but I'm not looking at too many options there besides the studs, right? So
awesome. Great. Next game. Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears. I wonder how the Chicago Bears are going to feel playing against the Packers without their owner in the building. We'll find out. The over-under is 43.5 points. The Green Bay offensive line is ranked number 8, and the Chicago offensive line is ranked 20th. That's a pretty decent disparity as well. So look out for the Green Bay defensive linemen. Will it be Rashawn Gary? Will it be Preston Smith? Will it be Lucas Van Ness? We'll find out. I mean, in reality, it's Rashawn Gary and everyone else if Rashawn Gary is healthy. Now, I think this is a little bit different because he's actually coming back from injury and actively recovering as opposed to just a dude that's healthy that just has a history of injury. So he's a guy that I may be a little more skeptical on, and I'd be okay waiting for him, a week or two, just letting him kind of cook on the bench. But a guy that I really, really, really like. I can't take him. I've basically talked about most of the relevant guys. So I'll let you talk about him. Go for it.
No, keep going, man. I like this. I like Evan on a roll. Keep it going.
I'm on a roll. Devondre Campbell. He's coming back from injury. So I don't know if he's playing. I'm pretty sure he's going to play. And yes, smash, because he's him. Quick note on the safeties: Rudy Ford, Darnell Savage. That might be the least exciting safety room in the entirety of the NFL. I can't think of a group of safeties that are less interesting. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, being uninteresting does not prevent you from scoring fantasy points. So keep an eye on Rudy Ford. He should be the guy that gets better usage, but we'll find out after week one and talk about it on next week's show.
All right. The only one I'll shout out is Lucas Van Ness, someone I like to draft capital-wise as a rookie. Not looking to plug him in, but I'd love to see how they utilize him edge versus interior. So just another thing to keep an eye on in that matchup. When we flip to the script, though, and we head over to the Chicago side, you know, TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, big money. They're in your lineups. Edwards over Edmonds, I think, seems to be the kind of consensus, at least on our side here when we've been talking about him as a group. So I'm in line with that. As far as the defensive line goes, DeMarcus Walker, Yannick Ngakoue, kind of the bigger names. I'm passing on Walker in this matchup. Ngakoue is someone maybe I'd consider as a dart throw. Rodgers is another one of those quarterbacks who historically held on to the ball longer than most others. I don't know what Jordan Love's going to do. I'm predicting or I'm believing that he is going to be looking to get rid of that ball quicker. They're going to be looking for more timing type throws and plays, which is going to only devalue what pass rush can, obtain here against this Packers team. So I'm really out basically on this Bears defensive front at this point. And then on the back end of it, Eddie Jackson showed huge upside before his injury last year, and it told us exactly why we can draft defensive backs late, because you can find guys like that at the end of your drafts or on waiver wires pretty easily. And I'm ready to get back in on that ride with Eddie Jackson again this year. So you can be plugging him into your starting lineups.
Yeah, man. I'm in big agreement with you as well as far as smash, like Lucas Van Ness. If you know, you know. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. The Las Vegas Raiders at Denver Broncos, over under 44 points. The Vegas offensive line is ranked 19th. Broncos offensive line ranked 11th, both more or less middle of the pack. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a contrarian take, not a contrarian take, just like not consensus, and talk about Marcus Epps, because I think that they brought him in to use his particular skill set to be more of a box safety. He's super, super inexpensive. He could be on your waiver wire. You probably have too many safeties as it is. But if you happen to, have built your team properly and not have too many safeties, great. Marcus Epps could be a guy that you would consider streaming or adding at some point this season if he has great usage. Let's see how he looks after week one.
Nope. I like that. I would not be in on it, but this is exactly what we need. You need to be able to, like you said, go opposite ways at sometimes and find those values against the grain. So,
also, sorry to cut you off. When I said
go.
you, I was referring to the listener ambiguously. I wasn't calling you out, Jake. Obviously, you built your roster perfectly. We know this. I'm just clarifying a few things. All right, sorry. Go for your next guy.
I mean, you're not wrong. No, but but speaking of, building things right or even getting into a building, Chandler Jones apparently today was not able to access the team facility. But I still think he's someone that you can put into your lineup, even if he can't get into the weight room there in Las Vegas. So it's probably more of a DL, 2 to 3 range type of play for me. But I think you can definitely do it with some level of confidence against this Denver team. I'm not as sold on them really having this offense put together in a good way just yet. And I think that this defense between Max Crosby and Chandler Jones and some of the others in the middle of that defense we'll get to, I think they can really do a number here and put together some good numbers for us in week one. So I'm in on them.
And now we get to find out if Tyree Wilson is legit or if he's going to be a guy that takes some time to cook. Also, quick shout out to Divine Diablo, greatest name in football, and Robert Spillane, Steelers legend. They will be the starting 2 linebackers in Las Vegas and are pretty good values as far as price versus production. Let's go ahead and talk about the Broncos real quick. Obviously, Josie Jewell is the starter, but he's very valued. So that's not really much of a start call. But Alex Singleton, he's also been a guy that has varied, but at times high average draft positions. Tackle efficiency, God, Alex Kingleton. So quick note to him, he's absolutely a starter worthy player. Who else do you like in this matchup?
I really like Randy Gregory and Zach Allen as kind of like some of those deeper plays and probably value pickups that, I mean, heck, you might even have those guys available on some waiver wires depending on your league setup. So I think those are guys in this matchup you can go ahead and put in as DL3s really comfortably. Um, Jimmy Garoppolo is not someone who historically holds on to the ball very long, but he's not someone who historically moves well in the pocket either. So I think that you can definitely find some pass rush upside between those two. And yeah, I would definitely be, like I said, looking to maybe put some of those guys into my overall roster and into my lineup even here in week one. On the back end of it, an Evan Ronda, specialty here in Caden Stearns, probably 120% roster percentage somehow.
More.
More. He is the projected starter for the back half of this defense alongside Justin Simmons. They tend to play more of a split look there, I think, or they have, and I think that's probably what they keep doing here. I don't know that we have like a box type role, but my one concern is they did bring Kareem Jackson back, who was someone who this has been around in this team in this locker room for a long time. So I just would hate to see some of those valuable snaps get split up there. So I have a little pause with Caden Stearns, but again, wouldn't be against it if you feel confident he's going to be the guy alongside Justin Simmons.
I would not start him week one, for the record. I would look at him on the waiver wire, maybe put a star by his name, maybe even add him to my bench if I have just so much extra space. But yeah, he could be a guy that has streaming upside at some point in the season. Let's go and move on to the next game and run through these so fast because, oh my gosh, there are so many. Philadelphia Eagles at New England Patriots. Over under 45 points. Most of those probably coming from the Eagles, who have the number one ranked offensive line. I will say I'm a little higher on the Patriots this year. Turns out going from a janitor as your offensive coordinator to an offensive coordinator as your offensive coordinator is a good thing. They also have an offensive line rank of 13. In case I didn't say that already, I really like the linebacker situation in Philadelphia is really, really interesting because I have been so in on Nick Morrow the entire offseason. And just what the heck? What happened? Did he say something mean to Nick Sirianni? Because why would you curse yourself with Zach Cunningham as a starting linebacker? What respectable Super Bowl aspiration team would put themselves in a situation where they desperately need to rely on Zach Cunningham as a starting linebacker? I know Zach Cunningham is just taking shots for no reason, but there is a reason why he has not been a starter on a team for a very long time. It's not really that long of a time, but still, there's a reason he got cut and released and all those things. I don't think he's that good. I thought Nick Morrow was a better player, but I'm not an NFL GM. I'm going to trust they know what they're doing. And Zach Cunningham's going to be on the field and he's going to score points because of it.
Yeah. I mean, if he's getting that 70% threshold in this defense, he's been someone who can attack downhill and pile up those stats for us, primarily as a tackler. But I mean, yeah, it's gross to think about, but here we are.
Who's more disgusting, Zach Cunningham or Alex Anzalone?
Cunningham.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But speaking of things that aren't as disgusting, well, maybe it is how much talent they have in the front of that defensive line for the Eagles. Obviously, you're playing your Hassan Reddicks and so on. But Jalen Carter, the rookie, he's someone I'm willing to actually play in week one, especially in DT required leagues. I would consider him, as a deeper play as well in some of those, sleeper type formats. But I know it's limited snaps, but all the reports have just been glowing of this guy coming out of camp. And you know what? I'm willing to get in for the ride here week one and start realizing some of that value right now. Everyone else kind of just holding on, watching a little bit here. Sidney Brown, seeing how the rookie gets utilized. Terrell Edmonds, I think, has a chance, who's primarily been a box safety with the Steelers, has a chance to maybe really make a name for himself now in Philadelphia. I comfortable with that DB2, DB3 range in your lineups, but I'd like to see a little bit of how they break down and use them too, alignment wise, as safety here in the back half of that defense.
Terrell Edmonds, another guy I have incredibly high exposure to in best ball. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Jason Kelsey on his own podcast called he had a little section called the Philly Dogs, where he basically talked up one dude from preseason who he thought absolutely crushed it. And you know who he talked about? Reed Blankenship. So they got 3 guys in that safety room, and only 2 of them can be fantasy relevant at most. So Sidney Brown or Blankenship, one of those 2 guys is going to have to be on the back burner. I love all 3 of them. It's really tough because I have high exposure to all of them. So I'm going to be hurting somewhere. But 3 great options for fantasy if they get the usage. Let's go ahead and talk about the New England Patriots, which is the worst transition, talking about great usage and exciting players. That one dude that got in trouble at the airport isn't getting in trouble anymore. So yay, cool. Football. Talk about your guy. Let's move on. I don't like the Patriots. They're boring.
All right. I love me Kyle Duggar. Huge smash play. I'm in on him top 5 this year. I think the biggest thing is right, does he go from 80% utilization to that higher, 90 plus, 95% plus usage. So defensive backs, Jonathan Jones, Jack Jones, Marcus Jones, a lot of Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses. Christian Gonzalez is there. I don't know how his last name's not Jones. Stay away from all of them to really see how this plays out, who's lining up where. They've been moving them all over the place. And yeah, I'm not touching any of them there. Jawan Bentley is a viable LB2 if you need it. But again, don't expect 100% snaps, especially even from your green dot wearing linebacker potentially. And Josh Uche, I'm really not a huge fan of playing him this week against a tough Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. So if you need to, you can, but I would be looking at other options for this week.
I'd be looking at somebody on the Commanders or somebody on the Cardinals, perhaps.
Yes.
Alrighty. We still have 4 games to go. Let's power through. Miami Dolphins at the Los Angeles Chargers. Over under of 45 points. This is going to be an exciting game on the offensive side of the ball, but it's also going to be an exciting game on the defensive side of the ball. And here's why. New defense in Miami. Tons of talent. Yes, they don't have Jalen Ramsey, but it doesn't matter because I got Cam Smith, right? That's his name, Cam Smith, rookie corner that they drafted.
Yes.
Pretty sure it's Cam Smith. Great pick, by the way. They had the least amount of draft picks out of any team in the entire draft, and yet they still got a great player. So they will not be hurting too badly without Jalen Ramsey. But 2 guys that I want to talk about are Jerome Baker and David Long, assuming David Long is healthy. If he's not healthy, perhaps Channing Tindall, if you really, really are desperate. But both of these linebackers should have really, really solid usage and will probably be the kind of player that you can leave in your line in your lineup every single week. So quick call out to those guys.
I love it. I'm sorry. Did you get everyone? Did you get?
I mean, I can talk about more guys if you want. Was there anybody specific on this team that you're excited about? I mean, I can keep going. I can do this all day.
No, you're good. Sorry. I'm not overly excited about anyone else. I mean, Bradley Chubb is probably the only one I'd consider. Beyond that, the Brandon Jones, Deshaun Elliott situation, depending on health, is up in the air, where I don't feel good about week 1 plugging them into my lineups unless, again, forced to. But a Chubb alongside Phillips. I mean, Phillips obviously been talked up a lot in the IDP show space for all the right reasons. But Chubb, kind of that running mate, kind of left on the side there. Sad little puppy looking eyes, but I think he brings some relevancy to us. It'll be a tough matchup to do it in, but I think in a Kellen Moore offense, he'll find plenty of opportunities, pass rush opportunities, that I'm okay plugging him in as a DL3 for us this week.
Speaking about guys who you can make excuses for, can we make excuses for Bradley Chubb?
We can try.
Yeah, good enough for me. Quick note, Miami offensive line ranked 20th. Los Angeles Chargers offensive line ranked 9th. So just keep that in mind, how that offensive line, defensive line matchup goes. A guy that I really, really like on the Chargers, anybody who's been in a best ball draft with me knows this, Eric Kendricks. Dude is certified good. Last season, he struggled a little bit. I am not too concerned. I think he's great. I think he's going to get more snaps than any of us could possibly dream of handling, and he's going to score lots of points. Elite analysis. Eric Kendricks, I'm absolutely starting him this week. Now, the real question is there anybody else on this defense that's like not Joey Bosa, but is still interesting? Or Derwin James.
True. Yeah, I mean, Khalil Mack for me is one that, I just want to call it out. I mean, he played 860 snaps last year, something like that. Had very strong, above average to elite almost type of production in terms of, his win rates and pass rush pressure rates. So I just, maybe it was obvious to people, but I just want to say that out loud to, sometimes fatigue or, the name starts to fade into the sunset with so many years, but don't forget about him. He is a strong play, and in this matchup too against Miami is it's a plus matchup for him. So you should definitely be looking at getting Khalil Mack into your lineup where you can. Beyond that, Alohi Gilman, we really want to see that role and how they utilize him. I don't think we're getting him into lineups yet this week, unless much deeper leagues. And Kenneth Murray is one where I don't think, the Deion Henleys of the world here have overtaken him. So Murray's still likely going to see enough volume in that 70% snap range. I would be looking for better options though now. You can get Murray in there this week as a deeper linebacker play, but you should be getting ready to have him not be in your starting lineup at some point this season.
It's a great call out. Is the trajectory of his usage kind of trending down, we expect, throughout the course of the season? Hey, Alohi Gilman could be a starter if you're in one of those classic, I mean, I'm sure you all are in those, like, start 7 DB leagues. So, you can put him in your starting lineup there, maybe. Let's go and move on to the next game. Los Angeles Rams at the Seattle Seahawks with an over-under of 46.5 points. Mostly coming from the Seahawks because no Cooper Kupp, most likely. But on the defensive side of the ball, there are some exciting players. I'll let you talk about 2 of them. But the other guys, Michael Hecht, which I just realized is how you say his last name because I thought it was Michael Hoyt. You know who I'm talking about. He's the edge rusher there. And he played pretty well last season. He should continue to play well this year. Aaron Donald is still there. He did not retire, which means those edge rushers should be pretty productive, which you'll get into a little more later. Another thing to note, obviously, the 2 defensive backs that we expect to play all the snaps are Jordan Fuller and John Johnson III, returning back to LA. But also keep an eye on, I guess, is really what I want to say, on the linebacker 2 role there in Los Angeles. I don't think they're going to play a lot of snaps, nor should they, because neither guy is all that good, just by NFL standards. They're both better than me, don't get me wrong. But Christian Roseboom versus Jake Hummel. My money's on Hummel, but Jake is on Team Roseboom. So
I am. It's a gross team to be on. It's a gross conversation to have, but some of those deeper leagues, you got to have these conversations. So we like to just, put them out there so that people know the names that are not so obvious. One of the names that is very obvious is Ernest Jones. I think hopefully you've understood by this point, he's an elite play. And as such, you should consider him that moving forward for the rest of this season. The other name, though, that's maybe not as well known is Byron Young, rookie this year, but he stood out well in camp. Not a ton of talent to beat out there, unfortunately, either. A lot of rookies, a lot of undrafted talent, or free agents that have come in to really just try and fill out this defense. But it seems to be Byron Young's job to lose at this point. The volume for this defense will probably be a good one, a good number above average, just in terms of the fact they don't have the talent to get the other team off the field once the defense is on it. So I think you have a viable volume play, but really mostly just from that aspect. So that really pushes us more into the DL3, DL4 range type of play. But the nice thing is it's a favorable matchup, so you can feel a little more confident in that. Seattle, not an ideal offensive line, or I should say it is an ideal offensive line to go up to for IDP
not
production.
if you're Geno Smith, not an ideal
True,
offensive line.
true.
But yeah, which actually reminds me, I forgot to say their ranks, which is 30th for Seattle and 28th for the Rams. So yeah, this might be the worst. Well, Cardinals were 31 and 28. No,
something like that. Titans, Saints were 24-32. There's some gross offensive lines playing together this week.
Yeah. So this is going to be a great game to stream some defensive linemen against if you, desperately need some help. If you're like a Nick Bosa manager or Brian Burns manager, who else is holding out? I feel like just like one other guy. I mean, Chris Jones, I guess, if you're relying on him in like a sleeper league, you could stream guys. And a guy that isn't a streaming option, but is still a great option, Uchenna Nwosu, smash week. I'm absolutely with you on this one. He's going to be solid. You know who's not a smash week? Jordan Brooks. Because what the heck? He was supposed to come back like in late October, like Halloween time, and now he's just like on the field. Okay, a little background for our listeners. I don't have time to do this, but I'm going to do it. I'm a strength coach. Like, my job is I work with athletes and I get them stronger and I help them be healthy. So this like personally resonates with me as something that just like it's offensive to my soul that Jordan Brooks is on the field right now. And I don't know why. Like, I'm not like angry at him. Like, good on him for recovering quickly. But that seems insanely dangerous to put a dude that has had that little amount of time to recover from an ACL injury on an NFL field. Like, what? I'm hoping he stays healthy. But like, I know I said I'm not an injury prone guy. But if there was a time where I'd be very, very concerned about a re-injury risk or just somebody not being healthy, this is it. So do not play Jordan Brooks week 1. I do not care if he puts up 50 points. I will sleep happy knowing that I did not put myself at risk of putting that dude in my starting lineup. That was a rant. I'm sorry.
Rant over. Appreciate it. From there, Draymond Jones is another option. Rams. We talked about the Seattle not having a great matchup in terms of the offensive line. Rams not really that great either. So Draymond Jones is someone who is a great streaming option in this matchup. Exactly. You talked about, Evan. Hey, waiver wire Sunday morning, you need to plug someone in. This might be a name this is very likely a name that's going to be out there. You can just throw in there to get you through week 1. And then Julian Love, someone who's stepping into that Ryan Neal role that we talked about was so valuable last year. This could be him. We talked about, people who probably shouldn't be out there or at least struggle to stay out there. Jamal Adams, says he might be out there week 1. You don't know. But Julian Love will.
They officially announced him out as week 1. I'm pretty
sure.
They
officially now? Okay.
Yeah, he's out.
So that's absolutely, Julian Love should be in all of your lineups at that point. So, and likely will be the rest of the season too, regardless of what Jamal Adams' status ends up being. But him being out only strengthens and solidifies Julian Love in that role. So,
okay, I'm just gonna double check this because I'm like very confident that he's out, but also Sleeper is not loading, so I can't look it up.
I can check us if you want to keep us going.
All right, cool. Anyways, the Dallas Cowboys at the New York Giants. I'm pretty sure that it is Sunday Night Football. Yep, Sunday Night Football. The over-under is 46.5 points. This game should be really fun to watch. I'm excited to see this matchup here. And the Dallas offensive line ranked 6th. Makes sense. It's Dallas. The Giants offensive line ranked 29th. Makes sense. It's New York Giants. The linebacker situation is not all that exciting. That's not news. They tend to not be very efficient tacklers. But DeMarcus Lawrence, that is a dude that's exciting. Obviously, Micah Parsons, but I'm not going to tell you to start Micah Parsons because that would be a massive waste of time. DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side of the line of scrimmage. Nope. On the other side of the defensive line, I should say. He's old, but he's still good. He's kind of like Cameron Hayward or Cameron Jordan or any of the other Camerons, like old but good, certified good. So DeMarcus Lawrence, this is a great matchup against a number 29th ranked defensive, or I guess offensive line against Daniel Jones. Like, even if he doesn't get sacks, like Daniel Jones is going to run. Absolutely. And who's going to get the tackle? Probably the edge. So DeMarcus Lawrence, absolutely, I would like to play him this week.
Yeah. From there, jumping into the secondary, really it's Jaron Kearse and Malik Hooker. Be careful with Donovan Wilson at this point. We don't necessarily know the full extent of it, the health for him coming into week 1. So I really would probably ease off of him at this point. You can definitely roster him because when healthy, he's very, very relevant for us in IDP. But Kearse and Hooker are the ones that we're going to play with confidence this week. So, and that really kind of, I think, rounds us out for the Cowboys. then flipping over to the other side for the Giants, they're facing a good offensive line in the Dallas Cowboys, but they have one of the stronger fronts as well, right? We talked about the Commanders and the Eagles, just having really, really talented defensive front. But Azeez Ojulari, Leonard Williams, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, some of those guys don't have to tell you to play. But you look at Azeez and Leonard Williams; those are guys that I would be looking at. We want to be able to play. Leonard Williams probably more so just in the DT required side of things, but Azeez, some huge flashes when healthy last year when he played, showed us in terms of his analytics and what he can do winning and creating pressure, as well as just actually converting those into numbers for us in terms of the sacks that he produced in the opportunities he had too. So yeah, I'm willing to play him in this matchup as well. Is there anyone on the Giants side that you're really looking forward to playing?
I'm echoing the love for Azeez Ojulari. He is one of my flag plants this year alongside Julian Blackmon and Kaiser White. Xavier McKinney. I mean, obviously, he's extremely talented. What I really want to see is what they do with the safety 2 position. Up until the Isaiah Simmons trade, I was really into Jason Pinnock, or however you say his last name, Jason P. But I don't know if Isaiah Simmons is going to eat into his snap share. So we'll have to see about that. And the linebacker 2 situation. Is it Micah McFadden? Is it Darian Beavers? Is it Isaiah Simmons? I don't know. I know that Isaiah Simmons wants to rush the passer, and that's what he's going to do. So, good for him. Go off. But let's see if he actually has some staying power in the NFL. Other quick note between Jaron Kearse and Malik Hooker. Malik tends to play deeper. Kearse tends to play closer to the line of scrimmage. The Cowboys tend to have a low depth of target because they don't trust Daniel Jones to throw it deep, which makes sense. So Jaron Kearse, tiebreaker goes to him. Let's go ahead and move on to the final game. We made it. And then we have listener questions. So don't go away just quite yet. But the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, regular season debut. All right, fine. This is an IDP podcast. We'll talk about defensive players. The over-under 46.5. The Bills offensive line ranked 22. Jets ranked 23. Aw, they're right next to each other. That's so cute. All right, let's go and talk about some defensive players. I got to call out Terrell Dodson. Yes, I know I am a certified Terrell Bernard lover, but he's been injured in the preseason, which has left the door open for Terrell Dodson to earn that number 2 starting linebacker role alongside Matt Milano. And so it will be his for at least week 1. I like what you have written down here. Very fragile situation. That's a great way to describe it. It's like a pane of glass with like a rock hanging above it that's just waiting to drop. Like at any given moment, he could lose the job. But I think at least for week 1, if you need a depth play, maybe you had Shaquille Leonard and you can't pick up EJ Speed because he's already rostered, but for some reason Terrell Dodson isn't. I guess like he could be a guy that you could pick up and stream at least for week 1. There are a lot of other exciting guys. I'll just list them out real quick so we can move on. I mean, Ed Oliver's is fine. Greg Rousseau and Leonard Floyd should be pretty solid volume and efficiency plays because Von Miller's out. But the guys that I really like here, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. I mean, anybody who knows me knows how much I have of Micah Hyde. You were talking about Caden Stearns. I mean, talk about a guy that I actually have insane exposure to. Micah Hyde is my number 1 most rostered player for a reason. He's going to be on the field a lot. I'm higher on him than I should be. Jordan Poyer is the guy to prefer in that secondary. They got a slot cornerback as well. I forgot his name.
Johnson.
Yeah, he's underrated. He's great in cornerback required leagues. Anybody else on this defense we need to talk about?
No, I think we can hop over to the other side in New York. And, again, another one of these themes where teams investing in their front, the defensive front. The Jets have, Carl Lawson, John Franklin Myers, and Jermaine Johnson. Some of those names that, maybe are more fringe, but, they have Quinnen Williams and other big names that are going to be out there. They invested in Will McDonald. There's so much in terms of uncertainty of the volume that these guys will play. And then facing off against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. This is one where Josh Allen was pressured a ton historically over the last 2 seasons, but the sack conversion is very low actually, right? So he's kind of that big-bodied quarterback who's also very mobile, hard to bring down. So it's really hard to fully realize some IDP production in these matchups against a quarterback like Josh Allen. So I'm actually in a situation where if I don't have to play any of these defensive fronts outside of a Quinn and Williams, I'm actually fading pretty much all of the New York Jets defensive front, again, outside of Q. So unless that's his brother, Quincy Williams, I would also still play him in this case. So I think he's someone who will see closer to that 70 to 80% snap range too, in a game where he'd be a very viable LB3 for our IDP rosters this week. Anyone else that you like on the Jets side, or should I just wrap it up here?
I just want to make a note. Like, I've been watching Hard Knocks, and not a single mention of Quincy and Quinnen being brothers has happened at all. And I just feel like that would make for a really great storyline. So I just kind of feel bad that like they haven't talked about it yet. The secondary is really boring. Jordan Whitehead and Adrian Amos are the starting safeties, I guess. They got some corners.
Is it Amos? I thought it was Tony Adams now.
Oh, it might be. What's the news? This is news to me. This is important.
I thought it was Tony Adams. I thought he's played his way into the starting role, is the last I heard.
He might have. I mean, Adrian Amos isn't that good. So, dude, I'm such a hater. I'm sorry. I know these guys aren't listening to this episode, but like I come across as such a jerk sometimes. Adrian Amos is a starting NFL player. He's making a lot of money, way more than me. All that being said, no, it's believable that Tony Adams potentially took his starting role. Either way, you're not counting on either of those guys. They're probably not even on your roster. Let's go ahead and move on to our listener questions. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. So these questions are coming in from the IDPshow.com. If you would like us to answer your start sit questions, you can submit them next week over at the IDPshow.com. We will put out a thread every single week before we record our episode. And if you get your question in time, we'll read it on the show and answer your start sit situation. So these guys are the ones that made it in before the cutoff. If you asked your question and we do not talk about it on the show, fear not. Jake and I will personally respond to you where your comment is on the website, because we value your questions and I hope that you appreciate our input. So this first question comes in from Kai. He's asking us to start 2 from this list of 5 defensive players: Brian Burns, Chase Young, David Ojabo, Byron Young, and Zaven Collins. Jake, how do you feel about this situation?
So I think he's got some, decent talent at the top of this list, but I understand where his concern is, and I think he even mentions it in the post, right? Like, what happens if Burns sits out? What happens if Young's not ready to go fully? Well, you're left in a pretty gross situation is what you got going on there. But you got some guys who I think here in week 1 have decent enough matchups and decent enough volumes that can get you through, hopefully to when Burns and Young are playing in week 2, if not in week 1. And that's going to be Byron Young and Zaven Collins are the 2 we want to target here out of those 5.
So the recent news as of 5 days ago, Chase Young was not cleared for contact. If Chase Young plays, I would start him over probably Byron Young. But obviously, if Chase Young does not play, yeah, those 2 are the guys that I would roll with. Are we in agreement there?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Donald's question. Now, he needs to start 2 of these 3 players this week, and he also would like our opinion on the remainder of the season. And these 3 players are all safeties: Kyle Duggar, Ryan Neal, and Von Bell. Well, I will say, Donald, that is a great problem to have. Who do you like between this group of 3, Jake?
I think you got him in order, in my opinion, and that's Duggar, Neal, Bell. I talked about I love Duggar. Neal's someone who I appreciate what he's shown us last year. Bell has done it historically. I'm just maybe not as fully excited as you are for the Panthers' overall situation on that defense.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I will say I do think Von Bell will have great usage, but yeah, talk about usage kings. Kyle Duggar and Ryan Neal will definitely be in the box as much as they want to be and will score lots of points. So yeah, I agree with that week 1. The only thing I'll say is season long, I have a lot of faith in Von Bell. Ryan Neal, like, they don't have a lot of investment in him. I think he's probably the starter all season, but like, if I had to choose a player from this list that could potentially lose their job, it's not Von Bell. It's probably not Ryan Neal, and it's probably not Kyle Duggar, but I have more faith in Von Bell. I'll also say Marte Mapu. Like, who's to say that his usage doesn't ramp up over the course of the season? Just some more context for the situation. I'm really not concerned about any of these guys, but just to list the lower end range of outcomes for these guys. Am I way off, or is that a fair point?
No, I think it's a fair point, and I think you can argue the details between Neal and Bell, for quite some time. I think again, he's in a good situation or a good problem at this point. So
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and answer Daryl's questions. Now he needs us to pick 2 at each position and a flex. So this looks like a sleeper league to me, actually, but I'm seeing Josh Allen listed as a linebacker. I
I think
think
he
he
said it
could.
was Yahoo.
Oh, it's Yahoo?
Yeah.
Boo. Josh Allen's a defensive lineman, but I see, obviously you don't have any say over that. And I don't even think Yahoo lets commissioners change positional designations, do they? L platform, play on sleeper, play on RSO. All right. Linebackers, Fred Warner, Ernest Jones, Josie Jewell, and Denzel Perryman. I'm not even going to talk about Josh Allen. Let's start with just that. Who do you like between that group of 4 guys?
For me, it lands on Ernest Jones and Denzel Perryman. Again, this is a good situation or a good problem to be running into. I just think that Ernest Jones is a clear vacuum for the tackles, so his floor goes way up for me. And Perryman is someone too where until Harris shows me he can be a greater detriment to Perryman's production, I think that he's going to be the guy, again, absorbing a lot of those. Jewell, I feel in the similar vein, but he does have Singleton there. So we've seen Singleton go off and grab 20 tackles in a week. So I think that these are the safer plays with some really great upside, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect balance between floor and upside. I think Fred Warner has elite floor, but of that 4, I think he probably has the lowest floor. I don't think that's too hot of a take to say. And yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. Yeah, man, that's a great problem to have. Those are 4 really, really solid linebackers. It's situations like these that ask, like, I would never find myself in the situation because I hate holding on to valuable linebackers and I always want to trade them away for like offensive pieces. So I'd probably be looking at like, Kaiser White and Aziz Al-Shaair and like Christian Roseboom or something. But like, whatever, that's beside the point. Let's go and talk about these defensive linemen, not counting Josh Allen, because Jeffrey Simmons, Chris Jones, and George Karlaftis. I agree with you. Jeffrey Simmons and Chris Jones are the plays here, unless Chris Jones doesn't play, in which case it's George Karlaftis, of course. So Jeffrey Simmons and George Karlaftis. I don't think you need to stream a backup. I think you have enough guys there that if you need to start 2, you have 2 guys that will be good. So if Chris Jones plays, play him. If he doesn't, play George Karlaftis. That makes sense, right? Do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, nailed it.
Awesome. Finally, defensive back. Ryan Neal makes another appearance on this episode. Kevin Byard, Marcus Jones, Brian Branch. Yeah, this is the easiest answer, I think, of the groups. It's the 2 strong safeties. That's Ryan Neal and Kevin Byard. Marcus Jones is a free safety. Brian Branch is a slot corner. Those guys don't tend to have as good of usage and therefore tend to not have as high tackle efficiency, but they're great players. So I'm fine with having those as backup options if you need them. Do you want to add anything there?
I think I'm going to correct you. Marcus Jones is a cornerback.
Oh, Marcus Jones. I was thinking
Yep.
of somebody else. Who was I thinking
Marcus
of?
May, maybe.
Ravens.
Marcus May.
No, that's Saints. Who's the Ravens free
Saints.
safety?
Marcus Williams.
There we go.
Yep.
All right. Well, even worse then, Marcus Jones is less valuable than because of that. Even if you have like kick return, punt return yards, I'm like Christian Gonzalez could be a guy. They have a lot of dudes on that roster. I'm not going to count on him being a consistent returner. So either way, I still agree with you. But thank you for the correction because I do that a lot. Finally, the flex. Obviously, we'll just take either of the 2 remaining linebackers that we didn't start. I agree with you. Error towards Josie Jewell. He has a higher floor and just a great ceiling. Is that why you would lead him, or is there another reason?
That's exactly why.
Great. Why don't you do this next question? Because I'm just kind of hogging all of these. You're the ones that's actually, putting the answers in. Let's see what you do for this next one.
I think you just did it because it's one of my guys. So Sean came over. He said, "Who's going to be playing slot for the Kansas City Chiefs this year, McDuffie or Snead?" So at this point, I'm leaning McDuffie because he's the healthiest of them. And he was the only one out there in preseason to actually get slot snaps between the 2 of them, again, because of the health of Snead. One thing I just want to throw out there, because why not have a monkey wrench in the plan? Chamari Connor, rookie for the Chiefs, actually saw some significant slot snaps while on the field with Trent McDuffie while he was playing outside corner as well. So it's something that Steve Spagnuolo mentioned earlier in the offseason, that it could very well be a rotation, but it was very much in that vein of coach speak. So this is something where, this has been my plant on this situation is McDuffie's the much greater value at this point over Snead. And the amount that you'd have to pay to get Snead is not something I would generally do as just an overall IDP strategy. So I take the extreme value in McDuffie versus Snead. And if I'm wrong week one, it's easy enough to move on from it versus the sunken cost fallacy where you're like, oh, I spent a 7th round pick on Snead, so I gotta hold on to him type of approach. So that's where I stand. That's what I know. I wish I could give you a clear answer, Sean, to say it's McDuffie. The coach has told us we've seen it for sure, but at this point we're doing a little bit of prognostication and hopefully doing it the best service to you in terms of value.
Sunk cost fallacy. Oof, speaking my language, Jake. For Nick's question, he asked us to start two. He lists 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers. I think it's fair to say in situations where we have a lot of different positions, like if you can start a linebacker, generally speaking, you probably just want to start a linebacker. That's a little bit of game theory for you, but we'll still list the player names. Nick talks about Leonard Williams, Alex Anzalone, Jonathan Grenard, Kaiser White. I agree with you. Start the linebackers and Alex Anzalone and Kaiser White. Am I, what's the reasoning there, I guess, to kind of give you the mic on that? Why would we prefer linebackers generally?
So for me in this situation, it's the higher volume that I expect both of them to experience this week as well. If this was a week with Alex Anzalone and he was, facing the Chicago Bears, let's say, right, and just maybe a slower pace of play and overall snaps, this is something where maybe Grenard is kind of the one we want to target, right? Maybe in a favorable matchup. So it's not that it can't happen, but for me, I tend to lean towards those floor plays, especially in IDP, right? And assuming you're in a situation where this is a flex position that that you're asking between defensive linemen and linebackers where it's mixed like that, I like to insert that safety in those types of roles because you probably have the volatility already in your other positions, in your other starting positions at the defensive line, defensive tackle, wherever it is. So that's just kind of my overall look at it. Like I said, but if you wanted some bigger upside based maybe on some unique scoring, Grenard would probably be the one I'd give a chance at this week.
Yeah. And finally, Chris asks us, so he's got a linebacker situation with 3 guys to choose from, a defensive line situation with 3 guys to choose from, and a defensive back situation with 3 guys to choose from. So I'm going to go ahead and list those guys. I'll let you pick your favorites. At linebacker, we've got Devin Bush, Seahawks, Robert Spillane, and Denzel Perryman. At defensive line, we've got Cam Hayward, BJ Hill, Trayvon Walker. One of these is not like the other. And defensive back, L'Jarius Sneed, Dax Hill, Jordan Whitehead. One of these is not like the other. So, Jake, who do you prefer between these 3 groups of 3 guys?
At linebacker, it's Perryman. I think we've hit on that topic enough that's pretty obvious. Why? At defensive line, I actually like Trayvon Walker here. Hayward was a close call for me too. I think the matchup is a little bit more favorable here. I think that Indianapolis is going to be in a situation where they're passing a little bit more, or at least on the field more, playing from behind. I think that gives a Walker an opportunity in a positive game script for the defense to have a better week overall. And then on the defensive side, the defensive backfield side, for me, it's Dax Hill. I talked about, I appreciate his flexibility, versatility, and how he potentially will be utilized. Snead with his injury could come in, but come in week 1, no practice, no offseason, and be great because he's done in this enough years already. But I'm gonna err on the side of safety here and take Dax Hill.
No pun intended. Well, hey, Jake, guess what?
We did it.
Yeah, we made it. We're live. The first episode. I feel like this is probably going to be our longest one. I think as we progress through the season, they'll probably get a little shorter. But listeners, if you've made it this far, first of all, please, can you add us on Twitter and just reveal yourself? Because I want to know who our biggest fans are so we can give you a shout out or something, just because thank you for sticking around. Dude, I'm so freaking excited for the season. So many mysteries will be revealed. So many players will have breakout games. And unfortunately, there will be a lot of injuries as well. And we will be here to help you navigate all of that every single week of the season. So, Jake, I'm so excited to get to do this every single week with you this year. Nobody else I'd rather be doing it with. You are the best. So thank you for joining me on this episode, man. Anything else we want to do before we close this episode out? Give some shout outs to the socials and what else we got going up in the near future.
I mean, yeah, you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever it is, at Late Round DB. That sounds so cool to say.
It sounds so freaking cool, dude.
But yeah, no, check us out on there. And yeah, just make sure to get those questions in. I love talking through everyone's specific situations because you know what, I think it helps you guys the most directly, and that's what we're here for. We want to help you guys out. So
awesome. You can find me on Twitter at IDP Evan, which just doesn't quite sound as cool, but it's all right. I love that tag for you. It's so cool. Also worth noting, I feel like I got to give a quick shout out to my show, the IDP Game Theory Podcast, which will be making its return after week 1 on Monday night or Tuesday morning, depending on where you live. It'll be joining the podcast network here too. So I'm really excited about that. And I feel like it's a really great like wine to the steak of our weekly previews, because it's a great way to kind of recap what happened last season in like a quick 15-minute package, which kind of preps your brain, helps you get your waiver wires set, and then you really get ready for the beast that is the preview episode here with Jake. So just a quick shout out to that. But man, I'm so stoked for this upcoming season with you. It's going to be a blast. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in for the entirety of this episode. We will catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Peace out.
And now it's time to go, 'cause you about to roll with the IDP show.